All right, guys, we're going to come to order Wednesday morning, November 15th, and roll call present this morning, Richard Hussey, Nat Lowell, Pete Kaiser, myself, Peter McEachern, Jason Bridges, and Christy Kickham is out of the room for the moment. No one from the public for public comment. Entertain a motion for approval of the minutes for the meetings from October 19th and the 23rd, and to hold the 25th, the 1st, and the 2nd for revisions.
So second.
Okay. Carries unanimously. No one opposed. This morning we have Rob McNeil here from the DPW Director for discussion of the fiscal 19 capital project requests, specifically facilities, fleet, stormwater, parks, and the solid waste enterprise fund. Rob, just so you get an idea of what we're going to be doing is we'll do your presentation. Before you get started, I'm going to ask you to do a little bit of grouping for our purposes, and then we'll do a Q&A with you on a group-by-group basis, and then we'll cut you free. You guys will do our typical discussion between the committee and town admin, and then if there's any discussion on rankings. Rob, I just wanted to ask that perhaps, do you have a sequence with respect to the DPW garage facility? Is that something you can do up front or at the tail end, or?
It's near the front.
Front. Okay, great. So I'd like to move that to the very front. Do that first.
Sure.
And if that's the pleasure of the board, no concerns there. And then, Rob, what we'll do is we'll group your facilities, the facilities maintenance programs as perhaps one presentation, and then we'll do a Q&A on that. Similarly, we'll go back down and we'll do the improvement projects. Already haven't done the garage facility, and then we'll do fleet. After your presentation, ask questions, then we'll do stormwater and so on. Okay?
Sounds great.
Great. So having said that, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So good morning. I appreciate the opportunity to be here this morning. I just want to frame today's discussion for the fiscal 19 DPW with an overview that we're essentially setting ourselves up to support the Board of Selectmen's strategic plan that has set priorities for transportation, environment, and housing. And sort of for the folks that may not be intimately familiar with the Public Works, we operate, maintain, and improve the town's critical assets, including but not limited to public roads, sidewalks, shared use paths, trees, parks, fields, facilities, vehicles, and equipment fleet, the stormwater system, parking lots, line striping, beaches, solid waste recycling program, the landfill and mining operations, household hazardous waste programs, bridges, mosquito control program, accessibility services, signs, snow and ice operations, cemeteries, and other special events. So we're pretty much tied in with everything that goes on around town or are playing some support role. Some significant changes we've seen this year. The responsibilities, although remain somewhat consistent, we are subject to weather and storm impacts, and that's sort of where we are expected to step up and deal with some of the stuff. Earlier this year, you've seen two of the town's three bridges, the Sconset Footbridge and Massasoit Bridge, were both closed. These were for identified critical repairs. And in our opinion, this is it's a symptom of a larger issue of some neglected facilities and such that have occurred over decades. So DPW is moving towards developing a systematic approach to analyze our major infrastructure, to develop needs, to be able to inform and program what we're looking to do for the future. Key issues right now we're looking at are staffing, proper funding, and resources. They're all needed to accommodate these repairs and replacement of critical assets. First and foremost is the DPW garage facility. something that's been sorely needed for years. The facilities that we have that are currently housing staff and some limited equipment space, we have rats, we have some serious electrical issues, and fundamentally it's just not an effective space to house our entire fleet, millions of dollars worth of equipment that is essentially sitting out in the elements and subject to the wind, the rain, the salt air. We'll get to the garage facility in a second. I'll just go down our list of key issues. Significant staff increases to support the mission-critical service delivery. Continued collaboration between PLUS and DPW to plan, design, construct roadway, sidewalk, shared use paths. I'd say an extension of that, coordinating with water and sewer to make sure our delivery of services is well planned and coordinated so that we can begin to execute roadway infrastructure projects in the future. That includes doing subsurface work first, water, sewer, and drainage, and then finish with the pavement so we can minimize or eliminate the amount of roadway utility cuts going into the future. Townwide assessment of stormwater infrastructure, townwide assessment of town-owned facilities, townwide assessment of public shade trees. These are all, as I mentioned before, something that's necessary to be able to develop from our needs what ultimately our program is going to look like year to year. And expanded data collection. There's been lots of talk around from the big data program that's gaining traction now, but internally working together with our IT group and other department heads to expand our data collection of town-owned assets to ultimately help keep track of all this stuff and help prioritize repairs and replacements. And finally, to prioritize improvements for our town-owned housing facilities to support our staff and their families. So with that, we'll jump right into facilities and start with our DPW garage facility. This has been under discussions before my tenure, and ultimately when I came in April, we started discussions, I think by late May, sat down with the engineers and started to look at what this garage space was originally designed to do, what kind of space. I think the original number was somewhere in the $23 million range, and somewhere around 30,000 square feet. We have pared the building back a bit to make sure that we maintained our critical spaces for some limited employee space, some shops. We're looking to consolidate the shop space. Right now we have a sign shop at 2FG, and we're looking to consolidate that with our facilities shop that is at our DPW garage into one location and sort of be able to share and better utilize that space. Vehicle and equipment storage, it takes up the grand majority of the building, and then some additional work beyond that. But ultimately, we're looking at about 27,000 square feet total, and ultimately that boils down to about a $15 million overall cost. That includes soft costs, and it also includes the DPW taking on some of its own site work, including relocating our salt shed and some other ancillary operations, fuel station, and some other things. So, as usual, we're willing to and able to do some of these other related improvements to keep the costs at bay. From earlier, it sounded like you wanted to pause there and take some questions, Stephen.
Yeah, I think it might be helpful just to kind of get initial feedback from members, and then we're probably going to request some additional information. I mean, I'd like to see some tangibles, some drawings and things along those lines, so we have an idea of just more tangible aspects of it. But if anyone has questions at the time, we could start with that, and then we'll go back to the rest of the presentation. Richard?
Steve, my question is to Libby. Just refresh my memory on the fire station building process. And by that I mean, we apparently didn't have enough money the first time we went out, the second time we went out, we didn't have enough the third time. So when we build this building, what's the approach going to be? I thought we were changing the approach.
Well, we have a building, kind of an informal, but a building committee group that's already started working with Rob, including people from Capcom. And I think the approach is to get very updated construction numbers as we move forward, which I think we have much more of now with this project than we had with the fire station.
I could speak to that, Richard, basically, and just say that as much as we think we know the cost per square foot and that sort of stuff, the island has quite a bit of variability. Obviously, the market drives different. Right now, the market is red hot, and it's a contractor's market. We saw numbers at the water company building that were at or just over 1,000 a square foot. I mean, it's hefty numbers. So our point is, we're working with, what we don't want to do is build a building to match a price and not get the building that we need, right? So we want to do something. I'm not going to use any comparisons to any other structures, and just simply say that we have a demonstrated need. We want to be able to design a space around that need and allow us a fair amount of flexibility for the future. And that's it. We're pretty bare bones, and at some point we'll have you through our space as we are now, and you can see, we're able to do with a lot less than most others. So we're not looking for the world. We're just looking for something reasonable to really pull a lot of our equipment under a roof.
So just following up, how did the school process go? They only had to come back once for some contingency. What was the process there?
Well, I wasn't really involved in the school process, but Peter could maybe speak to that. It was rather different because it was so much huger, I think, and there was.
I'm just interested in the process so that we don't keep going back to it. Well,
yeah, I mean, I think. $2
million, $3 million bucks.
Yeah, the fire station is probably not the greatest example of a good process, quite frankly.
So how do we avoid that?
Well,
I think what I hear you
now.
saying is that we need to be conservative with our numbers up front, so that we're not coming back for the scraps at the end to make sure that we can sign a contract. I mean, I think I'm not going to speak for the finance director, but on smaller contracts, we have this discussion a lot. Well, why didn't we ask for that up front? Why are we tacking this on afterwards? Now we have other contractual issues that we're running up against. So I'm with you. We want something that's simple, but at the same time, it's funded properly. And what does that mean? I think in the coming months, we'll have to make sure that we're solid on that.
Peter?
If I could add, to answer your question, Richard, what did the school do, or any project that's successful do or should do, is there's three important people. Obviously, it starts with Robert. And I'll be bold to say that Rob and his team, with Chuck and Mark, bring a lot more to the table than DPW has ever had in my tenure with this committee or FinCom, or my tenure on the island. That's one part. The other part is SMRT, who worked for the school, the architects, were very, very much proactive. That's what I look at as a good 35% of why it was successful. And the other success, because there's 2/3, is the contract that you finally, 2 million, $3 million. That's one part. The other part is SMRT, who worked for the school, the architects, were very, very much proactive. That's what I look at as a good 35% of why it was successful. And the other success, because there's 2/3, is the contract that you finally extend a relationship with. And I know that the Brad brothers, I mean, that's their business. And it's different than the people who build fire stations. They were specific to community schools. So Rob and his team will not be designing a school, nor a fire department, nor a panelized construction. You know, they're looking at a building that's I don't want to call it a barn or a garage, but it is what it is. And it has to provide services, it has to provide space, comfort for all the fixed assets. That's one thing that I've been asking for since I've started on these committees, is put the stuff that we own under cover. And Rob and his team understand that, know that, and that's why my gut is why they were hired.
Mr. Chairman?
Thanks, Peter.
Just
Now,
a couple comments. Rob, thank you very much for your quick up to speed to what you've inherited. With that said, though, we have to talk about the perception of what town meeting would say with a $15 million garage.
Sure.
That there has to be more explanation. So I want to just start out by saying, what are we looking to get rid of the current office out there? What are we doing? In other words, what are we going to do with the 3 existing buildings? The shop, the mechanic shop part, the thing across the street that's sort of across the road that's sort of storage.
Sure.
What are we looking overall to do?
There'll be essentially 4 structures at the end of this. You'll have
Okay.
the administrative building
That we already have.
the public interacts with.
Yep.
That we already have. We'll have the mechanics garage.
Yep.
That is off separately, and that's the newest structure.
Yes,
out there.
correct.
We'll have the salt shed
Yep.
and this garage. The other spaces will be demolished.
Okay.
that's,
This is almost 3/4 of an acre of building.
Well, we have 2. There's an old sort of, I would call it a Quonset hut, but it's a steel building type
Yep.
of garage space. And then tacked onto that is a building that was moved into that space. So it was a recycled building
Yep.
from somewhere on island.
Yep.
And then next to that is another recycled building.
So that would all
from
go
on island.
away. So that's where you're going to make new space.
All those old spaces, those 2 buildings that were recycled, and the old steel garage, those 3 buildings would be demolished. The fuel station and salt shed would be relocated, and then the new garage will take that space.
Okay, so we're looking to kind of do similar to what the airport has across the street from on Bunker Road that's attached to NERDA, that sort of type of.
Similar.
You're not looking for a new administrative office tied in.
No.
You're just looking for a really big
Open
steel,
garage space.
insulated, heated building, but
Correct.
not for mechanics stuff, but more for storage.
That's right.
So that the mechanic shop can be better function, because there is a lot of storage goes on there because of different types of vehicles. I see what goes on there, and I understand what you're saying. I mean, I think that the other issue would be, and this is just sort of a legacy, I like that term came up a few years ago. It really fits a lot of different things. We're staying out there. Right? I mean, like, this is it. We're not moving down the road somewhat, out to other town. We're staying here regardless of whatever happens, whether the dump may change or some other stuff. The DPW functionality is staying in Nantucket.
This is a permanent reconstruction.
Okay. All right, good. Okay, that's it for me for now. I have other questions, but it doesn't relate right now.
thanks, Nat.
Okay.
Anyone else would like to comment or question at this point? Jason, please.
Really quick, Richard, there are projects that come in way under as well. The Shimo sewer project, we appropriated $40 million. It came in at 18. I know it's not a facility, it's not a building, but there are surprises. So
Money.
I just wanted to throw something, example on the other side. And then I have a question for Rob. Is this going to be filled up immediately? Like, will you be able to expand into this the next 10 years, or is it full from day one?
Sure. So, as I mentioned to Richard, it's key to me to make sure that we do have some space to grow into. As we've seen, and I'm still learning about operations that we're currently undertaking and expected to provide, and we either have limited equipment to do that, or not the right, or maybe just shy of the full combination of equipment. And I'll mention some of that as we get into equipment. But the point is that, yes, we want to have certainly the grand majority of our fleet, maybe not every last piece of equipment in the garage, but certainly the majority of it, yes.
That's my concern, is we build it, we fill it up, there's still things outside, and we don't build it for the future. It's a one-time shot. Thank you.
Great. Richard, did you? No?
No, I have.
Yeah.
You kind of crafted my next question. It's more of a point than a question. Rob, this is another like sort of Nantucket perception, mindset, public voting, override thinking process that fits into this when we want to borrow this kind of money is the DPW needs to, I say this exactly the right way, know when it's reached its limit of becoming Toscana versus the DPW. Is that relevant? You understand what I mean when I say that?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah,
Like we don't want to go
there's a-
kooky. We
there's
want to
a,
be
um,
what we should be for a town that's really a city on paper. Okay? But at the same time, the private sector here is very helpful and down the street. And I know there's a lot of times where that doesn't work, and you could cite that, but I could also, sure, there's plenty of examples where they help as well as don't, and depending upon what it is. I think that this is a good plan right now that I understand what you're trying to do. I just don't want the perception to be the DPW's going to another level that's beyond what maybe most people think it should be.
Sure.
Does that make sense
It
to
does.
you? Okay.
Great. Kristen?
Yeah.
Rob, this might be a difficult question to answer, but any thoughts about how
No.
this? Yes. Okay. I'm good.
No thoughts.
How this would parlay into savings in the future for apparatus or vehicles, or how do you foresee the vehicle inventory being preserved or extended with this facility? It might be a little premature to ask that, but if
No,
any
I-
thoughts have gone into it?
Sure. I would say, given the environment out there, and it's pretty like that around the island, but out there we have a lot of wind, consistent wind. We have wind-blown sand, and obviously the salt environment. So having something like this and being able to wash equipment down in inside environment like that, I would expect that in most cases you're going to be looking at extending the life, 25% at least.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the pieces that don't get used as frequently, that see a seasonal use, even longer than that.
Stephen, just a comment?
Please.
And if that, and just to add in a good, maintenance plan on vehicles, as far as keeping up with them, just including a maintenance plan with each vehicle so that although
Sure.
they're protected, they're also getting maintained,
Definitely.
hands-on.
So we have excitedly added a central fleet manager who begins his job Monday. So the plan is to certainly extend the services that role has gone unfilled for some time. But the point is we want to develop a programmatic replacement plan and condition assessment first based on what we have in fleet currently, and start to work together, and we'll start to see as things come online, what the effects of having a new building are really having. So when we start looking at, we want to replace X, Y, Z, we should see, in the long term, we should see that let's say, for instance, maybe an 8-year planned life on a vehicle may be 10. and that could be consistently
Yeah.
going through the years. You know, we're getting a dump truck every 8 or 6, and now we're going out and going 10. And we all know, you know, 6 or 8 turns into 15, right? And maybe we're out beyond that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Should we be using, what number should we be using for this building? Is it 15 or the 18 with the contingency? There's a $3 million contingency. So is the number 15 or 18?
I interpreted that as being inclusive of 15, so it's 15 is the top. The contingency is part of that. Is that not correct or correct?
Yes, that is correct, the 15.
Okay, great.
This shows 18, but we'll go with 15. And I just am curious about the 10-year plan for the office building. What are your thoughts on that?
10 years for the office building.
In your 10-year lookout,
Sure.
where does that, an upgrade there?
Well, I would say the office building in its current location and configuration, I would expect that it would see some probably internal reconfiguration. We've already talked to IT to start to take a look at configuring some basement space. There's a full basement in that building, so being able to start to outfit some basement space, reconfigure the upstairs to better suit. I mean, we do have some existing challenges with conference room space and that sort of thing, but it's internal building stuff. I wouldn't imagine it's going to be even if we were to add on to that building. I don't think it would be anything significant. More to Nat's point, you know, where I think we have a good handle on where we think this build out of the staff and equipment is or should be to be able to provide the services that we're expected to. And so to that, we're not looking to, you know, like let's say double, you know, administrative staff or anything like that. But to your point, yeah, we definitely are looking and have an idea of, you know, if we bring on some permanent engineering staff, for instance, you know, we want to have some more fixed available space for them to be able to operate out of.
Just ask one more question, Steve. This is really important, Rob. This conceptual thinking about there, this is sort of like the school, sort of resetting, making new dirt, moving things around. You know what I mean? Like, that's why when I say this is it, that's what I mean. Like, we're going to invest out there now forever. It makes a different feeling, and it's easy to explain questions that people would have. What are we doing out there? Why are we doing this? You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
The other thing I have is the mechanic side of it. I'm big into vehicle maintenance, and I just want to ask, you know, this has come up in my 3 years now on this board, on this committee, is other town vehicles. I mean, we got vehicles everywhere, okay? And quite frankly, I don't know how we even fix stuff. Does it just go to the Ford garage? I'm talking about other vehicles. What do we do here? It's kind of weird. I see what happens with the fire department if somebody comes over and does that. And it's kind of, is the DPW, to me, is the place that would be, if we ever got a really good mechanic system in place out there where other town vehicles could be brought there as a part of its services somewhat to the rest of the town's vehicle fleet. Is that something that you guys have internally discussed as far as hitting the big reset out there and having a good facility that's more functional than just fixing what's broke?
Well,
you know what I mean?
Yes. So to answer your question, there hasn't been a larger discussion about what the mechanic shop could
Function as.
provide for services. What I would tell you is we have taken a look at what we are currently expected to do and make sure that we can provide really the best services possible. Try to do as much as we can in-house. Obviously, it's significantly more expensive to send equipment off.
Yes.
Some of the heavier stuff, we make arrangements for that. And
It's a lot.
it's usually only after we've already done what we can
Yep.
to make that happen.
I would
to
urge you.
add on other, to expand that into taking on other departments' service needs. I'm not adverse to that. I can just tell you, based on my own experience, if another director, for instance, is looking to have their fleet or individual vehicles serviced, it's sort of that's their priority.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it can get contentious as to what the priorities are. It's just something that needs to get worked out.
Mm-hmm.
If you have one department that's in charge of providing maintenance for multiple divisions, it's just something that needs to be handled. And beyond that, we need to recognize what the limitations are of the in-house repairs. Are we talking about, doing largely, basic
Yeah.
oil changes
Yeah.
and
Tires. I was
tire
just
stuff
thinking
like
about
that?
simple stuff.
Or
I
are we
wasn't
talking
getting
about,
into.
nowadays getting into computers and
Yeah.
and doing a lot more serious repairs? There's a lot more to talk about.
No, I
if
know
we're gonna
that.
go in that
No,
direction.
that was actually one of my other points, is the new diesels are complicated. The other question is something Peter mentioned, that this SMRT. I would urge you, I don't care what the extra cost is, put in-floor heat in this building, in the cement. Just by hanging those modines up in the ceiling, because that comes with the package, you end up with 80-degree temperatures at the roof where no one's at, and you're freezing to death on the floor. It's nuts. And you should also consider waste oil as well as just the conventional boiler system, tying in waste oil. If we're going to do this and write the check for the future, we should be doing more than just, oh, this is what comes with it.
Sure.
Because it's terrible. We've already experienced those modines up there at the other building. Birds fly in them. It's unbelievable. They just
Sure.
get destroyed. No one can climb up on the ceiling to fix them.
Most of the new
It's,
DPW
you know what I mean?
buildings are radiant heat floors.
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah,
And
it's the right thing.
I've had waste oil heaters at every garage I've worked at before,
Yeah.
so it's a good way to go.
It's the right thing to do.
Okay,
Thank you. That's it for me, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Nat. We're going to take Peter, Christie. I'm going to wrap it up so we can move on to the next set of lists.
Just as a point, taking what Jason said about the future and what Nat is saying, which makes 1,000% relevant to fleet mechanics and repairs and maintenance on a perpetual basis. What I would do, Brian can account for anything. It would be great to see if we do have an inventory like you have on the buildings, if we have a conclusive inventory of everything that rolls on the road, irregardless of the department. And I think it would be sort of the sizzle in the cell to the community if at least we did have a plan to think about how the DPW can potentially, and I'm not going to put words in anybody's mouths, but could potentially branch out and provide that service, because we are ocean locked and it is difficult with rolling stock when we don't have the expertise. And one other comment is hopefully we'll see on the FinCom level a line item that has a lot of money for continued education to educate the mechanics and anybody who needs to be continually brought up to speed on whether it's a chainsaw or lawnmower or a car, because I think it's underfunded, and I will support that. That's it.
Thank you. Christie?
Rob, the building itself, is there any flexibility with how the building's built? In other words, is this a very just standard structure with heat, with maybe some windows, or what do you have as far as choices? Whether it's the type of materials, its storm resistancy, the quality of its heating. Is this price just basically a base price, or what options do you have to make decisions on how that cost is, that final cost?
I would say at this fairly early stage, we still have full control over everything. So this is truly a base cost, and we definitely have the ability to dictate and drive that whole program.
So this is, so it would be all up from here?
Correct.
Not really, okay. All right, thank you.
Anyone else with comments? So, Rob, I appreciate the broad revamp out there. I think it's going to be helpful for the community to understand that, you know, this facility is part of that revamp and maintaining the equipment and bringing on aspects of developing personnel. Good comments from everyone today. They're helpful for me. I still have some concerns, I think, relative to smaller, similar buildings out there that are in the current SIP for fiscal 19, kind of marrying perception and practicality of those square footages and those costs and this square footage at a much higher cost. It's not something I think we can address now. I think the stepping off point for that, it may just be a recognition of what the plans are, but I think a stepping off point for that is looking at some plans. And I think we might have you back for that. We'll be discussing that, and also at that point get into timeline and some things along those areas. Just because we're well into it, and it's an important topic, so I don't want to cut it short. So I think it may be to be continued, and if we could jump off into the facilities maintenance program.
Sure. So as we discussed, sort of broken down DPW, and obviously we're going to be discussing transportation at a different time. So we're looking to focus on facilities, fleet maintenance, stormwater, parks, solid waste, and then administration. The list I started from identified 54 facilities. And obviously the list, depending on which list you're looking at, varies from this 54 facilities up to, I think, over 100, based on the list I've seen from Peter. But in general terms, we don't have a facilities maintenance plan. That's something that we're sorely in need of and are planning to develop. But based on 54 facilities and roughly 121,000 square feet, and just again, this is from various records, but we're looking at generally a weighted average age of about 35 years old into these. We started looking at current replacement values north of 90 million, and based on that, a capital budget to address current replacement value and upkeep somewhere in the 2 to 4% range. Which is about 1.8 to 3.6 million as a start. So as we've presented in the overall, if we go down the list of roof repairs, ADA accessible upgrades based on the town transition plan, which itself needs to be updated. The utility updates from HVAC to water, sewer, drainage, and some electrical. Site paving, bathrooms, some of the bigger ticket items here. Equipment replacements within the structures, and then lighting updates. Ultimately, we're looking for about $1 million to really meaningfully go after these structures in areas that we have internally identified. I apologize for not having really a lot of specifics associated with each individual repair request, but the ask at the end is about $1 million for facilities maintenance.
Rob, can I just interrupt for a moment? So
Please.
Can you just work into your presentation a little bit about that concept of an after-action details report?
Sure.
Just what you're thinking and how you proceed with that.
Yeah, so the plan would be moving forward to not only develop a facilities maintenance plan that would essentially, if I could boil it down to sort of a homeowner's perspective, it would be to have a home inspection done to develop a action list. What's wrong, what's needed to be repaired, and ultimately take each facility by facility to develop that sort of a list, that level of detail from every system and structure within that facility. Develop a list and then be able to work together with town management to be able to prioritize those. And then come back next year with a far more detailed, and for the future, a far more detailed list. That funding for that effort would come from essentially this first year ask, where we'd be looking at putting these out to bid and having specific work completed. We would have more valuable cost data per square foot for, let's say, fiscal 19 to inform the fiscal 20 capital requests and to start to populate that management plan.
Thank you. Questions, Richard?
Rob, we have 4 of these in your initial presentation now, indicated as medium recommended, not high. These are the only, they're the only ones that aren't high. So
They were.
they were high. They're all high.
To me, they are.
Okay, but how are we supposed to figure that out?
Well, I mean, with all due respect to the forms, I understand, that there's not much ever fits right into a form. So that was our best first crack at prioritization. So I would say if there's any flexibility here, anything that's not high would be sort of secondary priority, if you want to read it that way.
Rob, just while we're on topical and then more questions, we're going to be asking you for just a 1 through 25 ranking of 1 through 25, just so, or actually by group, I think would be more appropriate. So facilities, the maintenance programs, facilities improvement projects, the fleet management, the equipment purchases, just to go through and give us a list of prioritization. It's not so much that we're calling things out, but when we get down to the nitty-gritty of our evaluation and what kind of dollars we have to work with and what types of funding sources we'll be making recommendations on, we may need to be able to use that information, and we'd like to do it in a way that's consistent with your priorities.
Sure.
So you're aware of that.
Will do.
Thank
Follow up
you.
on- Can I follow up on what you just said?
Yeah,
Are
please.
you saying, because I have no problem if this is what you said, taking all the facilities pieces obviously except the $15 million building, and making it sort of one recommendation? Because it's sort of,
Well,
you did indicate that, but I'm not sure if that's what you meant.
what I'm asking for are
On just
ranking
that stuff.
information so that if we get information from Board of Selectmen and Town Administrator and FinCom in our discussions, that's how we're going to do it.
Okay.
The prioritization breakdown is not as important.
It isn't
But
for
if-
those, yeah.
But if it turns out something might be out of free cash and something might be out of some other type of funding resource, we want to know which goes where
Okay.
in our recommendation.
All right, but you're, in the sense of things, you're saying that's sort of one.
I think we should group things.
I do,
Makes
on this
sense.
one I do.
Yeah.
For sure.
What I'm
Definitely.
hearing is, just to clarify, for instance, under fleet management, we're asking for a number of equipment purchases. So if I'm prioritizing by group, ultimately 1 through 7, you want to see which pieces in order of priority.
Yes.
It's the right thing, Rob. It's just,
I'm not
go
questioning
back
that.
to the
I'm just,
perception again. The
making
other
sure
stuff,
we're
no
clear.
one would care about.
Just for fiscal year 2019.
Yeah, just for fiscal year.
Yeah.
We're just talking about the current stuff.
Sure.
There's no sense, it's an exercise in futility to be going on out years doing something like that. It's a waste of your time. We won't use it. Peter?
Is the word update synonymous with catch-up?
Probably.
I would say that there's going to be quite a bit of catch-up, for sure.
I think it's important for us as a committee to understand that, spending money on things that maybe if we had worked on them a few years ago, we wouldn't be spending it today is important to understand.
I would say, to add to that, there's a lot of not unforeseen, but there's still a very large unknown in a lot of these. And no matter which group you're looking at, there's a lot of unknown. I think the next few years is going to be shining a light where it hasn't been shown before, and trying to ascertain just how big each one of these groups need attention. So that's really the plan.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to telegraph, I think, because it's important. We're talking about perception and practicalities and so on and so forth, and getting information out to the public. With respect to facilities, 63 Westchester, I think, was the property that came up in discussion with the designees, or a property on, is it Westchester?
Yes, on the left. It's not
Yeah,
63, though.
38? 38?
Yeah, it's
38, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I got HTC stuff in my head. But I guess the point is that there are things that have been deferred, and we appreciate the fact that you're getting those quantified, and we understand, I think, or we will understand that that's part of a process, and it's going to take some time to develop, but that there are going to be some significant costs associated with getting things caught up, if you will,
Sure.
so
No,
that we can be doing preventive and predictive maintenance on a scheduled basis versus just addressing catch-up.
Yes.
So it's almost like a two-part process.
It is, absolutely, and it's ongoing. I mean, in the short term, I would say that we are, the message is clear to the staff. We are to take our facilities, our grounds, et cetera, to the highest place it can be under the current scenario. Until we have, real capital investment dollars to make significant and substantial changes, and those would largely be driven by some bigger planning. When we start getting into, doing updates to, say, the jetties, Surfside, and Children's, sort of those seasonal facilities
I was
that,
just going to ask that.
I mean, that's a whole different discussion. These are to really get us, sort of to buy us time with some critical, whether it's safety issues or other really mandated things that we need to get squared away there, or just historical issues that we are faced with year after year after year at these facilities. What we're hoping to do is really to step back, do some master planning at these locations, and then come forward with a plan for replacement.
Peter?
Just a crazy question, but have you ever in your tenure, either here or other municipalities, contacted the building inspector yourself and your facilities manager and just walked and talked code and compliance and where we're in, where we're out?
So we have done some, I would say on a case by case. I have never gone through a facility, all facilities with that sort of approach. But let's say for the ones with there seem to be some low-hanging fruit, and where the code is not my area of expertise, I will definitely call in, whether it's local code enforcement or fire for safety, life safety stuff, or outside consultants to come in and do. We did a safety audit at a couple of different facilities on our own campus this year, as an example, to sort of get up to speed and address what we know we have issues with, but we just don't know the depth of those issues. And so we definitely established some really early actionable data that we could then have the facilities managers start to peck away at.
And the reason why I'm asking is it seems that if we could utilize people that are already on the town's payroll who have the ability and the authority, instead of hiring a consultant all the time, why wouldn't we use that?
So I would say that it's a great question. First off, we want to look there first, because if we have the ability to have that at our fingertips, why wouldn't we take advantage of that? I think what you'll find is that in our case, as in most cases, you have facilities, or you have staff that is sufficiently busy. They are involved with so many balls in the air. To pull them away to focus on something like this may not be their most appropriate use of their time.
Correct.
So in some cases, I find it, you're asking a lot from another director who's sufficiently busy. We're responsible for our own stuff for the large part. So taking responsibility of that, I would say finding the right consultant, let's say, that is not just working for us directly. They're also, they tend to be up on the latest and greatest in the industry. And it may not be something that, with all due respect to, inspectional staff, it may not be their area of expertise. So we can pull those experts in.
Thank you.
Goes a long way.
Anyone else? Who's
Just-
going to move it along if not? Matt, go ahead.
Just real quick,
Yeah, go ahead. We got time.
jetties, Surfside, and Children's. Rob, press the pause button on the millions, I can tell you that.
Matt, just for some, we're going to actually.
I know, we're going to talk, I know
We're
that
gonna move
stuff
into those
is,
next.
gets into
Yeah.
all sorts of
So
other
the-
questions.
Okay, so the only other thing I'd say, just, I think Peter brought up a good, it'd be, and I think there are other areas where perhaps town resources can, staff, facilities can be married together in terms of professional input. But I would just caution the, kind of the advisory role and the enforcement role. You want to keep those two separate, and especially when one works for the state, because they're kind of obligated to be addressing things they see in a different manner than someone who's there to kind of help you and guide you through improvements. Christie?
Rob, I know with these maintenance programs, you said there's a lot of unknowns, a lot of things you're still learning about. I know you were able to put costs on each item, and is that based on your knowledge so far, being here, or is that based on just the knowledge you have from all facilities that you've looked at in the past?
We're talking
Going down-
specific to 5 through 10.
Correct.
I would say,
Just how did you quantify those?
yeah, that's been my experience on island to date.
Okay.
And some of the larger ticket items that we have with the deputy director and facilities manager have looked at and sort of started to look at what we're paying for prices now versus what some of these bigger projects are that are needed.
And just to be clear, I mean, these are numbers as a jumping off point, and part of that jumping off point is getting information put together as to what those numbers really should be on an annual basis. It's
Yeah.
not, this is kind of a start number, and then getting an actual list of the facilities for each category, and then determining what those costs might more realistically be based on the assessment that's done. I just want to be clear that for our membership and the community at large, that this line item number, for instance, for roof repairs of $150,000 is an annual number, may be more or less, but it's going to be based on more information after FY19, both practically in the field and through, as you used as an example, someone coming in and doing a home inspection and telling us what we may need on all of our facilities, and then we plan it out.
Sure.
Okay, so great.
Yeah,
So, go ahead.
just a couple of points to that. I mean, excuse me, again, sort of using the homeowner as an example. The challenge with that can be that home inspectors, as you know, will point certain things out, and certain homeowners would say, we definitely have to get all this done. They'll go through it, get all those repairs done, and ultimately, there's others that would say, well, we'll do, 5 out of the 10 listed here, and we could do without. We'll let the next homeowner deal with those, and we'll worry about negotiating that in the price. We don't necessarily have that luxury as municipal owners, right? We have to first and foremost protect the public, and make sure that our facilities are safe, that they do comply with codes, and ultimately, we don't necessarily, so I guess just wanted to
Yeah, I get-
caveat that, you know, there's a responsibility level that's different than being a homeowner for the municipal realm.
And Rob, thank you for that. I appreciate the kind of clarification or the finer tuning of it. But also want to point out that for the requests, so that when these are coming in future years, there is an opportunity for you to indicate whether it's an imminent threat or a legal requirement. And we do, you know, we know you'll use that, but that is a kind of based on, and after it's entered review and vetted and verified, that raises requests to the top of the line in our evaluation recommendation.
Sure.
So with that said, I'd like to move us on to the facilities improvement projects, which we've discussed, at least the initial preliminary on a DPW garage facility. And we've got three items, and that gives you a chance to talk about the jetties and Surfside and Children's Beach facilities. So Rob, if you would.
Yes, thank you. So the jetties, Surfside, and Children's being our sort of our focus during the summer with the concessionaires, all the visitors, and being able to keep these facilities up and running has been sort of the path of DPW for decades. There's discussions on both sides of these facilities that go from it's always been this way. Let's just keep the patient alive. We'll redo the siding next year. We'll deal with whatever the case may be for that specific day. Tell the concessionaire they don't need that extra cooler or whatever they're asking for, and we'll just continue to soldier on. And then there's the other argument that says we've become we're expected to be a world-class destination, and we need to knock this down and start over with something Disney-esque. So I don't know where we're at, frankly, but we are truly expected to at least have these facilities functioning, both for the concessionaires who are contracted, we're contracted with, to provide a suitable facility to, and then obviously to the public, to make sure that these facilities, again, are accessible, safe, and providing a location to recreate when they come here for the summer. So the expectations are quite high, and I don't think that the general public, particularly the year-rounders who grew up with these spaces and certainly understand what they have been expected to become, have a real true appreciation for just how I won't say neglected, but let's say how far past the useful life that they have served. Not saying we have to turn it into
The Graydon House.
the Graydon House.
Not to
Nothing against the Graydon House.
No, I love it.
Sure,
Just
not.
not
But
for hot dogs.
my point is that things have changed, and we need to understand that there are some serious limitations with these facilities in their current states. And so, when we're dealing with some real issues, such as closing facilities because of sanitary violations, not because they haven't been kept clean, because the infrastructure cannot support or have failed because they're so far beyond their useful life. We're getting to a point where this is management by emergency, and that's not a place it's not a fun place to be. Another example, the pops. When it rains, we have to pump the water off because the drainage system
We heard about that from David.
doesn't work.
Yeah,
So
that's different.
thankfully, we have equipment, manpower, that sort of thing. But it's just not something that we want to have as our standard operation should not be to act as an emergency function here. These are facilities that are relied upon, and they do have some deep-seated, deep-rooted legacy concerns from the public and from particularly from the people who grew up here. So we're not asking that we change these into their each individual Taj Mahals at each facility location. I think what we're asking for is to ultimately tear them down and build a modern mirror image of what they looked like before, unless people are looking for something different than that. But the infrastructure that exists there, Nat, is just not suitable.
When you say infrastructure, you mean the sewer lines, things under the ground. You're not talking about the structure.
We're talking about it all.
Issues.
Talking about
We
the whole
have
thing.
all kinds of issues, from underground to when these were built, they certainly didn't have handicap accessibility
No.
in mind, like most of the other things.
Yeah.
But we now have, a very, we're encouraging and providing other handicap accessible programs, with the Moby mats, with the Moby chairs.
Yeah.
So not only these destinations are something that are visited by, capable people. They're also the handy-capable people that come, and they know that they can come to Nantucket and visit one of our locations and have accessibility that they don't get at other places. That's the sort of things that we need to look at.
Well, as far as Children's Beach goes, there was extensive discussion. That's the only one that's been discussed to the level that you're getting at recently, was the bathrooms,
Sure.
blowing it up, raising it 10 feet off the ground, and all the stuff that comes along with today's insane FEMA stuff. But what happens, and this is really just basically the nut of it, is hot dogs and hamburgers at a new building in two places, Surfside and Children's. Jetties, that was Camp Holiday. God, that was unbelievable. I remember when I was a kid going down there. The building itself, you can always say it's past its useful life, but what is the town going to do as far as, if we're going to build a new restaurant facility to accommodate all the different functions that go down there, and then lease it for what? How much? You know what I mean? Like, in other words, we're making more money by doing nothing and patching it because we haven't spent anything. We just sort of have these places. They sort of like own it just because we own it. If we start investing huge money in these three spots to make new facilities, there's a zillion questions that will come up as far as what is the town's plan leasing. Are we going to lease it for a reasonable rate because it's not something that anyone can make money
Sure.
with? It's a complicated.
I'm not going to
the
argue on that.
bathrooms are the biggest.
What I'll
issues.
tell you is this: is that those sort of discussions are definitely a higher echelon discussion.
Yes,
that's
it
from
is.
management.
Yeah.
But what I'm getting
Wow.
at is, and what I think I'm seeing is that I was not here for the Children's Beach discussion with the bathrooms, but
Yeah.
I think what I see is that, and with some of these others, as Christy mentioned earlier, we're lumping together large ticket items so that we can do manageable projects, right? If you can't attract competition here, if you can't get the attention of a roofer or a contractor because it's small potatoes compared to what they can get over at the yacht club, for instance, for a large project to bite into. And so my point is that if you're going to do a bathroom, you're going to get the highest priced bathroom you've ever seen, right? You're going to get the Bill Clinton $1 million toilet seat because it's a tiny project on a large site, and you're not doing the whole building. If you do the whole building, you start to get economies of scale.
Yeah. So I think the general on this, and then maybe we can do some specific questions, but it's pretty clear we're looking at, you're taking, Rob, the approach of balancing the rustic charm with functionality as a big picture. These numbers are for helping us to determine what needs to be done to get out of crisis mode with some of it. And to Nat's points and concerns that this request is funding not so much to make those decisions, but of what the final product will be, but to ascertain what needs to be done, and then there will be some work group, I presume through the selectmen, and perhaps Nat will be on it as a capital committee member to look at what the final product's going to be and what the final numbers are going to be in out years. So with that said, Christy and Pete, did you? Christy and then
Yeah,
Pete.
Steve, through you to Libby. Libby, with these three items, is it, for the most part, over the next 10, 15 years, is it just business as usual? Even before I look at the numbers here from Rob, I'm just wondering what's the plan with these, because I've kind of maybe lost a little bit of, I don't know, I don't know where we're at with, I know there's been a lot of discussion with Children's Beach, and I just don't know what we're at with the all-out plan for these.
Well, I don't think we have a plan beyond continuing to bid them out. They're all in the middle or beginning of 5-year leases, so that's another issue. Because if we're talking about complete reconstructions of things, there's going to be somewhere where they're not open. So something else is going to have to happen. But we haven't really had any
So business as usual.
higher echelon discussions about changing the business model or anything like that. Jetties has changed over the past 20, 25 years.
Mhm.
Just sort of as a matter of increasing what it offers there and what it does there
Yes.
over time. And each time a bid went out, there was kind of a little bit more brought in.
Yeah.
But it wasn't really a planned situation.
So business as usual for these
I think so.
leasing out and, okay.
Okay, thank you, Libby. Peter, did you have a comment?
I mean, I didn't, but just something I've been thinking about. I mean, it doesn't seem like the owners down at Jetties have had, or the owners, the people leasing the facility have had any issues with, I don't know, customer complaints, foot traffic, how well, they're able to operate their business down there. Have you had any discussions with them regarding?
Definitely.
Yeah, there's been a lot of
I'll let
issues
the
over
manager-
the summer, ranging from drainage to sewer backups to kitchen grease problems.
Yeah, but that's different than
To the point where they would rather rip the building down and wait.
Well, I don't think
No.
it's not their, I don't know that it's in their thinking, really. They just want it fixed.
As far as the point, yeah, so there's sort of two different schools there. One is I can't operate because we have another sewer backup. I can't operate because insert utility issue or building issue here. So we're closed. I mean, there's ramifications there. Secondly, it's, hey, this kitchen was designed to handle hot dogs and hamburgers, right, to Nat's point. And now we're doing this full menu, right? And I need space. We're putting coolers, we're putting refrigerators outside the building, literally outside the building, to handle current operations that are going on. I totally understand where you're coming from, Nat. I didn't grow up here, but I can tell you I've grown up around these little shanty summer, and I get it. Like, that's the feel that people are coming here to get. But there comes a point when you can expeditiously provide a modern menu at a modern but quaint facility that we're going to be held to by HDC anyway. And ultimately, it's going to be safe, it's going to be clean, it's going to be, all the things that we have control over when you rebuild, not when you scab together pieces and parts so that they'll be open the next day. And hopefully through that next day, and maybe we'll get through the weekend without calling people in again to keep this thing moving.
So approximately, would you say how many days were they closed because of issues with the building this past summer? If they wouldn't have otherwise been closed.
I don't know.
Maybe a week total
So 7 days.
between the different facilities, hours here,
Well,
hours there.
Jetties, though,
I
specifically.
mean,
Jetties,
I
probably
don't
a
know.
couple days,
A couple days, so they were closed a couple days
yeah,
because of issues that were fixed within a day or two.
yes.
paper towel story.
Yeah.
Peter?
More a question to you, Libby. Do we have a contractual contingency plan if and possibly when one of those concession stands were closed down by the Board of Health because of, for whatever reason? That's not going to happen.
I would have to-
Contingency that helps the tenant in his contract or her contract, that if our facility, because it's the town's facility, and if we're closed because of a public health reason, which is typically the first entity that would close a food establishment because of its inability.
I'd have to
comply.
look. I'm
I think
not
we
sure.
should. Because as a neighbor, I think we should.
So I just want to reiterate, what we're looking at here are sewer, drainage, electrical, and the design and construction. And, back to Nat's point, it's that these may drive the end result of what's required to bring things up to code and practical use and reasonable future use may drive other discussion, but
Yeah.
that's going to be another separate process. This is just the funding to get started with determining what we need to do and do some of it, correct?
Sure.
Okay. So with that, I think, and keeping an eye on the time, we're going to move on to fleet management and equipment purchases. And then we've got still to be mindful, please, stormwater, parks, solid waste, and the DPW administration.
Can I just close the facility for one little
Go ahead.
diddly point?
Go ahead.
I can't get that brown paper towel thing out of my head. When David
help you out.
when David came in here, David Gray came in here, Rob.
Yes.
He was the drainage stormwater pump thing. That discussion already happened, and at least from my perspective, that was already given the blessing to fix this problem. Whether that was a brand new building or not, that stuff would still be broken. At least that's how I'm sort of looking at it. I go in these kitchens. I mean, I'm like living in these places. This is what I do for a living. When we put out a bid to, however the lease works, when someone's lease is up and we write it, they know what the kitchen is. I mean, they've jiggled some stuff around down there this year and made
Sure.
it work. Just like Marshall did before, jiggled some things around and made it work for that menu. That isn't our problem. I mean, you know what I'm saying? I mean, we can't make this be something that works for any.
No, I agree. I think
bid
regardless
that we wanna-
of what we do,
Yeah.
we're going to have, and you could argue that you're going to have someone come in right behind that
That
new
wants to
building,
do something different.
say, hey, we
Yeah.
want to do something that's going to cause you to do that. You're right.
Yeah.
And I'm
I
not
mean,
saying that at all.
And
I'm
when
saying,
then there's the element that, and Libby spoke to this pretty well. The last 25 years. Well, you know what that is? The pops, weddings, Hyannis boats, fast. I mean, it's changed everything. It used to be just a bunch of diapers down there, and that's it. Beach chairs and the little umbrellas, and people just carried them to the beach. It's all changed now.
sure.
But that market is never going to go away. And I understand what you're saying. Like, I'm not disagreeing with fixing these places. I'm just struggling with the inevitability of how far is the town going to rent a place that's a family atmosphere that they got to make money too. The people that rent it have
Sure.
to earn a living.
I think
you know
I'm
what I'm saying?
looking at it
for
from-
65 to
From
70
a different
days.
perspective, not a money-making scenario.
It won't be. That's
It-
right.
This is what
It
I'm
won't
saying. We have generations of people that show up and they
Yeah.
go to their specific facility beach because that's what they have
Yeah.
been doing forever. So what I'm trying to recognize and avoid here is something that is a stigma, right?
Mhm.
I am not going back to that facility because of X, Y, or Z.
Well, I agree with
Right?
that, Pop.
And so I'm trying to get to the point here where we can recognize that if we're going to put in hundreds of thousands of dollars to do some necessary repairs to these things, that we have an opportunity to step back before we invest those dollars to say, how do we improve here? All right, what has changed, to your point? What has changed in the past 30, 40 years when these things were originally built?
Regulations.
Not just that, but the use of them, right?
Yeah.
We have bus service, right?
Yeah.
We have parking lots that were never designed to handle bus turning movements. We're now trying to go in and retrofit these, modify the parking spaces to accommodate this stuff. That's one simple issue among probably a litany of 100. So that's what I'm looking for. Let's make these things work and work for today, but have that same quaint feel so that we're going to have continued generations visiting and having that same great experience.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, guys.
Yep.
Thank you, Nat. It's helpful to get it out and get it discussed. Keeps everybody on the same page. So we're going to move on to the fleet management equipment purchases, Rob?
Yes, thanks. So right now we operate with one single loader. We've got along. We need another one. We need at least a secondary for many purposes. So that will stay as my number one priority. But I will resubmit a prioritized list. The tracked aerial lift is something that will ultimately replace the tree bucket truck that's been out of service. And that has some flexibility. It's a standalone piece that can actually track through a small fence gate and get in and around facilities. It's not the bulk that the tree truck has been. It's something that could actually be mounted on our roll-off vehicle and be moved around or trailered. So there's a lot of flexibilities built into it. It allows for the arm to go below grade slightly and as high as, I believe, 80 feet. So it certainly services not just our tree requirements, but also could serve as a general man lift for various activities that we undertake at our own campus as well as other facilities. So again, it's another high priority vehicle for us. The rubber-tired vibratory roller with the trailer would ultimately be in support of the grading operations. We have somewhere between 10 and 15 miles of graded roads or roads that we grade. And along with the grader was down, as most people know, was down in the spring and right through the summer. We just got it up and running a short time ago, following Jose, really out of desperation, while we wait for the brand new one to come in. And so we've got that up and running, but what we're simply doing is pushing material around, and we don't have the means to mechanically compact on a large scale. So the mechanical vibratory roller would be able to accompany the grader. And I think short of bringing some of these graded roads to pavement, this would extend the life between service at those locations. The skid steer is, again, another piece that we use very significantly all over for construction, for vegetation management. It's a very versatile piece. Gets used all the time. The 1-ton stake body truck with a plow obviously would support our snow and ice services with the plow, but at the same time, the stake body truck is something we use every day in trash removal. The 1-ton dump truck with a plow is essentially replacing another that would be at the end of its useful life. And any dump body goes into service and is, again, versatile, supports construction efforts, and pretty much anything that we do. Having the plow along with it just allows us some flexibility to continue to support snow and ice. And then the operations and facility managers' vehicles, again, putting plows on both of those, and onboard computers. The thought process there is that both the operations manager, facility manager, deputy director, and office staff is currently utilizing old Ford Rangers that were handed back to us from, I believe, the Plus operation. So they've been recycled down to us, much like other communities do for police vehicles and the like. So they have really reached beyond their useful lives, and the operation and facility managers' vehicles would replace those.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Rob at this point? Christie?
Rob, any of these just going to stay on DPW site property, or are these all going to be out and about?
These will all interchangeably be on and off campus.
Okay, and then operation facility manager's vehicle with plow, is that actually going to be used? Will they use that one?
Yes. So generally, when the managers are out during snow and ice events,
Yeah.
they are more in a observation capacity. But when they see something small,
Hit it.
they can hit it,
Yeah.
whether it's opening up an intersection or
Big efficiency.
yeah, it's allowing them the ability to take action when they see it on a small scale, or even just be in support of other folks that are out there doing the larger lift.
Will this increase the DPW's plowing, or is this replacing current plows?
This would enhance what we currently have.
All right.
We don't currently have the plows on the two managers' vehicles.
Would this alter the contracts at all? The plowing contracts, or not significantly? I don't see it, but
No, I don't think so. I think if
Contracting
anything,
out.
it's really just going to,
support.
hopefully, it would bring service to that particular storm event to a close sooner,
Yeah.
just by adding additional
Got it. Okay.
capacity out there.
Thanks.
Peter?
Rob, how many pre-existing attachments do we have for the skid steer? Do we have any?
We do.
Okay.
I don't have a count for you, but
That's
I
good.
can
But
get
it's
that.
good to know, it's good for the committee to know, this is it's a multi-use tool, like you put in your pocket, it has multiple uses.
It is.
Um,
To that point, though, it is important that as our responsibilities evolve, that we constantly seek feedback from staff, not only in what they're currently doing, but then what they're now being asked to do that they hadn't before, maybe when that attachment or larger piece was purchased. So we are looking we do get feedback all the time. Hey, we have this piece, but it doesn't quite do what we're now doing over here. Or, hey, we're now doing this, and this piece doesn't do it. So, whether it's sending folks off to trade shows, or having folks here that are letting our staff know, or researching online, letting our staff know what is available out there today. Those are really key discussions to have to make sure that we have the capability to do the job and do it efficiently.
And my follow-up, have we ever looked at leasing any of our equipment at all?
It's a good question. In my experience, the pieces that really are helpful to lease are things that we barely touch. And in the past, I've worked with folks to get a articulating sidewalk tractor, something that we could use in the winter for snow and ice operations. We would lease it for 3 or 4 months, and then it was gone. And it was great. It was very efficient. It would pay through the snow and ice budget, and we could give us a blower attachment, a plow attachment. So something like that, I think that would be a great use. Here, we don't get the snow what I'm used to. So the point is that what we currently have, we're looking at doing some other pieces, but it's something that we could use. We're looking at sidewalk brooms, for instance, walk behind automated brooms, and those can be used for other things as well. So it's We will and will continue to look at what we can lease if we don't need to have it physically here, and it's something that can't be used year-round. Definitely.
Thank you.
Jason?
Yeah, just quick question. What's the skid steer? I understood all the fleet, what they do and what they're used for, but the skid steer I'm just not familiar with. So
Sure. Multiple names
Bobcat.
for it. Sorry, Bobcat.
Okay.
It's the skid steer is basically just, it's got like tank tracks. So that's the name. It's sort of it's like the Xerox machine.
Morphed into it.
It's morphed into skid steer because
Everybody makes them now.
they're all sort of universal.
It takes decaf coffee, though.
And the track machine versus wheels is way better. It tears things up when you turn more, but it works on everything.
Thank you.
It's totally different.
Does it flip this option?
Yeah.
Anyone else? Richard, Peter, then Peter.
Just a quick question, the state body truck replaces which truck in the fleet?
So the stake body actually would not replace a piece. It would be a new piece. But the stake body is something that's critical to our trash operations, much like the other commercial haulers out there. If it's not compacted, as we have one single compactor, we put it out, we get recycling and that sort of thing. It's loosely thrown in the back of a stake body. Stake body is essentially just a 1-ton dump truck
With higher side.
that has high sides and something that we can retro with either plywood or that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Thank you. Peter?
Just back to the vehicles for a second. So there's 2 vehicles with plows, one being purchased in 19 and one being purchased in 20 for $60,000 each. Right, the operations and facilities
That's what it
managers,
looks like.
one for each of them,
Correct.
one in 16 and one in 17.
I think that was an adjustment made at the draft stage of this process.
And then a couple line items down, there's director and deputy director vehicles, 2 of them.
That's right.
In fiscal year 2020 so that's $100,000 for both vehicles.
Yes.
Assuming they're less expensive because they don't require the plow.
Correct.
Or any additional, okay. So
Yeah.
4 vehicles, new vehicles total.
Felt it was more appropriate to give the staff the
The
new
plows,
vehicles
yeah,
first.
Let them go.
Yeah.
Clean it up.
Good move, Rob. Any other comments or questions? Just have one if you guys. Rob, could you just kind of elaborate, the rubber-tired vibratory roller is going to need a new person, and then to what extent they might be using other equipment, what their hoisting ratings and some of that stuff are, because it's a pretty big personnel number.
Sure. The rubber-tired vibratory roller is essentially would be added to our grader operations. So we talk about the grader, the roller, dump truck, and loader. Ultimately, would be the crew that would be running that grading operation. And beyond that, we're going to have, for the first time in many years, 2 operational graders. Assuming this older one that we've got limping along now stays active when the new one comes in. So the point would be we would have a grader out sort of doing the first rough grade and then be able to bring the crew in behind them to start to supplement with dense grade material, do the fine grading, and then ultimately compact it in place. We're talking about adding crowns, and providing some drainage off where some of the things. So it's sort of a top to bottom look at the whole operation.
So the additional personnel that's budgeted in under your net effect on operating budget, that additional person or persons, maybe these are part-time, this is the total of cost allocation, but it's to improve the efficiency of the operation as a unit functioning.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it's definitely a unit function, but I would say that same person, because we can't grade year-round, that new ask among the others would ultimately be part of the team that's plugged in to do various services. But they would not be, let's say, singly trained or licensed to specifically do this. The license allows them to do many different tasks.
Okay, that's great.
I was just going to say that to add, we have the educators right here for the staff, so that's important.
Yeah, that is important.
Can I just ask one quick question?
Yeah, please.
Okay. The 2 graders is helpful for, the biggest thing that will bring is after a rain, when the ground is wet, that's when the best time to grade, and you can't do it all in 5 minutes with one machine.
Well, what we
That's a
noticed this
huge
year,
thing.
specifically after the Jose event, we had the phones lighting up off the hook all the time for a good solid week, week and a half. And the sad reality was we had no grader. The grader was down. So we were out, as we have been, trying to grade roads with a loader, the
No,
one
it
loader
doesn't
we
work.
have.
Can't
It's
do it.
horrible.
No.
So when we finally did get it up and running and limped it out there, it died on the way, right, to the first run. We got it back up and running, and it's been working. And then it was a matter of communicating that priority list, like, hey, we went here first, and trying to make those, defensive calls. So, yeah, I agree with you that having a second grader is going to go a long way, because we're going to be literally in two places at once.
Yeah. Also, just, I won't ask any more questions after this.
Ask what you need.
We have mountains and mountains of ground asphalt on the island of Nantucket now that inadvertently we've all paid for, whether it's at the federal level, the state level, the local level, or some other level somewhere. Are we able to get this stuff to put down on a lot of these places, like a cow pond type situation?
Sure.
You know where these hot spots are that have
Yes.
dense
So
grade is not free.
we have.
So when I hear you say that, I'm just wondering if that's all sort of been fixed in the last few months. We got mountains of it.
I won't say that all of that has been fixed. What I could say is that we're working together both with our
Victor in the airport.
own partners, the airport,
Yeah.
as well as our suppliers, to make sure we have sufficient and
It's
appropriate
incredible how much
material.
there is.
Yeah. But, I mean,
I mean,
dense grade is really what's needed.
I understand that.
And that
but
can be supplemented
you know what I
with,
mean.
with the
It's
the
good
millings.
stuff to use.
The millings alone aren't going to solve the problem, but they're definitely going to be
Better than dirt.
They're going to be part of the solution.
Okay, cool.
Good
That's
good to hear. Good to hear. Any other comments or thoughts on the fleet? All right, so we're gonna move on and jump into the stormwater.
Thank
And Rob, I'd say just hit the whole thing. It's 3 projects.
Yep.
And we'll go through it.
Thank you. So stormwater management is something that has sort of just happened. The pipe system here goes back probably beyond centuries. The point is that largely we have some rough understanding of where this stuff is. We have almost no information that's in the file with its current condition. So we are, sorry, I'm jumping down to the CCTV portion of the project here. But we've taken on we've partnered with the sewer division to climb onto their closed-circuit television contract that they have signed up with National Water Main. I was just bid out this summer, and the contract is underway. We have jumped on and initially had thought the funding for that was going to be about $250,000 to ultimately TV and give us a condition assessment of our drainage pipes for the entire center third of the island. We were very excited to see that with the pricing that got returned, that number is actually $70,750. We expect that number to be slightly above that when we're all said and done, just based on what will be necessary to get the cameras down a lot of these pipes. We expect a lot of sedimentation and that sort of thing. So the contract allows for heavy cleaning, and there's some unit prices in the contract. So the point is, for under 100, we'll have an extremely well-informed database of information. So beyond that, we have some existing funding that will help us plan to take action with what we find. So we're going to be working together with the same engineers that are supporting David's sewer division and their efforts to find and correct some sewer issues. So I expect to, that's why that fiscal 19 for phase 1 is blank. So the fiscal 2 would be doing the west side of the island. That number has been adjusted to the 100 to reflect what we saw with the CCTV bids and the contract that's underway. And then the CCTV phase 3 would be the east end for that same 100, going out to 20. So from that, we expect to develop over the course of the spring and early summer plans to be able to take action and go out and design and construct improvements to the drain system. So that's the 3.5 ask in fiscal 19, and then adjusted for inflation, moving out to 21 in succession as we continue to develop and find what's wrong with the systems, to develop plans to improve those, and then to be able to go out and construct them. So those numbers I would expect could be adjusted in 20 and 21. 20 could be a mop-up of what is still necessary. I don't expect these to be done in 3 years, frankly. These numbers will likely be stretched out over many years and be ongoing. And then moving up to the top of the list there, the VACCON truck. We have seen in the last 6 months since I've been here a just endless need for borrowing the VACCON from the sewer division to address imminent emergencies related to stormwater. And this is not just something to be used to clean out and keep up with or move ahead of the traditional clamshell catch basin cleaner. The VACCON, does a great job because it does 100% of the job, as opposed to the clamshell, which takes most of it and makes sort of a mess. The VACCON has a lot. Certainly, it's a hell of a lot more expensive. It's a hell of a lot more maintenance intense. But the point is that we're going to see that thing. It's so versatile. We used it to assist. We borrowed it again to assist with the last couple feet of excavation, just earth excavation, for the reinstallation of the base pole for the Wisconsin flagpole, for instance. So it's one of those really nice pieces to have that provides just an amazing amount of flexibility. But it's going to be the cornerstone of our future stormwater program here. And so I've sort of pulled, as you've seen, these two pieces of equipment out of the fleet ask to specifically start to align them with stormwater, the sweeper and the truck, because we want to start to, at least on paper, account for our stormwater costs. What's happening off island, if you're not familiar, EPA mandates and NIPD's permits are requiring most towns to really start to take a hard look at developing enterprise funds to support these sort of efforts. So we want to start to look at it that way, even if it's a while or never comes, just so we can really have the answer and account for what we are spending on stormwater.
Thank you.
Just one quick question.
Yeah, Richard?
The personnel to operate this equipment, is a new hire specific to this equipment?
That's a great question. We have a number of folks that are working to do this and are specifically trained already on our staff. They're borrowing equipment from the sewer division. We expect to be able to have those same staff, operate that, but also train new ones, existing staff. I wouldn't say that we have someone specifically in mind, or we're looking specifically for a new hire to support this equipment, as I mentioned earlier. Most of the people that we bring on or develop into, whether it's junior or senior equipment operators or foreman level, while they have a primary function, they also get plugged into various special projects, and when the time arises, which is sometimes on a daily basis, with vacations or people out sick, they're versatile. They get to plug into a number of different places.
So just a quick follow-up on that. So, Rob, on the VAC contract, you do have personnel listed as a net effect on operating budget increase, but that may just be as much as indicating to us that that's going to be on the road rolling
It's a dedicated unit.
40 hours or
Yes.
a week. And okay, just to understand what you're
Sure.
looking at there. Any questions or comments? at the moment? Nat?
But I would say that you should develop a private road fee structure until the private sector gets one of these, because there used to be one here. David Gray actually owned it for a while. There's so many catch basins and leach pits that are full of sand. We love dirt in catch basins in Nantucket. There's flowers growing out of many of them, as you've noticed, I'm sure, if you're driving around now. Slope retainment on the way we build roads needs to come back to life to prevent dirt going in these things, and I think that you've probably already figured that out. And so we need two of these trucks. Whether it's the sewer department borrowing or whether it's two that the DPW had, doesn't matter. We need to have another one of these simply because it's so versatile and can work when it's dry. That's another issue, where you can't use other equipment as easy as you can these when at all times.
Mhm.
So it's a good investment.
Rob, just, I guess a couple of things. So the writing's on the wall in various ways with the talking about the vac truck, and I echo Nat's sentiment. Needing some type of a private service. Currently it's a high margin, kind of a profit source. So that could perhaps be an opportunity for a fee for service model, and that would help us with our aquifer. Well, I mean, as an enterprise fund, it's if you're providing a service. I'm not going to get into that part of it, but I'm going to say, and I'm going to encourage that it be looked at, that simply this, as an enterprise fund providing a service to the town, which is somehow linked to protecting the aquifer, which is clearly under the EPA mandate and what the stormwater protection in the drain basins are about, there may be room for a model where the town goes in, can provide a service at a fee that is less than what someone from off island would be doing. And frankly, it's just not being done. I know from community association management experience here on the island and having people approach me from the commercial sector with parking lot restaurants and supermarkets and whatnot, that finding someone to come in and actually pump this stuff out and having some place to dump it is it's incredibly expensive and prohibitive, and it's not happening. So I'm not saying it's not our bailiwick to get in. It is our purview to be looking at the effect of operating and where personnel costs come into play with these capital assets. And I'm just suggesting that there may be a way to offset some of that and actually be something that would help the town overall.
Can I just comment?
Please.
We have discussed this, but we're not close to the stormwater being an enterprise fund yet anyway.
Sure, yeah.
And we routinely are contacted by people asking if the town can do this work. I'm sure you know. We
Yeah.
can't even do our own work. So before we're going to do other people's work, we need to be able to do our own. And we recently had an inquiry from someone who actually sounded like they were bringing somebody over.
Yeah.
So we suggested that they get that word out to other private subdivisions to all get together and make it more cost effective for them. And I have to leave in 10 minutes.
Okay, great. So just to close that out, I mean, it looks like the last quote we received was $6,000 a drain basin. So just keep that in mind.
That's great.
I'll do it for 3.
Yeah, and
All right.
so, and there's other things that relate to that, including where the waste goes and whether it's hazardous solid waste or not. Just a couple quick things. So with respect to the CCTV,
That's kind of a refreshing price and cost, rather. And that's going to be GIS accessible data that would be, I presume, available in the director and the deputy director trucks once those are online.
Correct.
Okay, so it's good for people to understand that this is a systems approach. We're not just doing this kind of piecemeal. There's a final, not necessarily a final design, but a design is and how these pieces of equipment and the data interact so that the department is operating at more of a peak efficiency than just kind of ambling along.
Yes.
And then I think the other thing I just want to say in terms of closing that out is that with respect to the CCTV, I'm hoping that we will be using, and it seems to be the case, we're going to be dovetailing the in-house operation of the CCTV with the new van and the personnel that sewer has, perhaps, into stormwater. So that would even further reduce our cost, and it would kind of underscore and validate the investment in that asset. Is that a
I think
assumption?
it's not a huge stretch, but I would say that it is at least a small
not
stretch.
tomorrow.
It's not tomorrow.
But
It is the future, and
it's the
it's
goal.
being discussed. So the nice thing is that, as we've seen before, and we continue to do with the VACCON as an example, we continue to function as partners. And, so where we need support from one another, no matter what division it is, we're working together to help each other.
Okay, Rob, before you move on, I'm going to ask, because we do have parks, we have solid waste, and we have the DPW administration. And on our agenda, we have a review of funding sources for the FY19 capital request. It's not something we're going to get into a great discussion. It's going to be, I think, just a very quick preliminary statement from Town Administrator Libby. And since you're leaving in 10 minutes or so, Libby, do you want to just do that?
Sure.
And then you'll be able to free to go.
That's great. I'll step out.
Sure. Brian's going to hand you out a couple of sheets. They're the same sheet except sorted differently. And don't get married to it. This is very preliminary. It is just what we were asked to start, and typically around now we start looking at how we are going to fund certain things. So this is sort of preliminary items that we would be proposing for funding, but we are not done with our review yet. So the sheet that says Town of Nantucket Capital Recommendations by Funding Source, we'll just maybe go through that one. So the funding sources for capital include capital exclusions, which is a one-time override for 1 year for a particular item. The entire thing would be paid for in 1 year, and the tax rate would go up for 1 year. Debt exclusions, which would be over a period of time, typically 20 years. Capital from operating budget, that's the 1% minimum capital funding requirement that's already in the projected fiscal 19 budget. Capital project free cash. Now, the total there for free cash, $4.6 million, is not the total amount of free cash. And then we've got article reappropriation, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, bond premium proceeds, very small number, and a little bit of grant, well, not a little bit, $1 million worth of grant for the Marine Department. So right now, what we've talked about internally, and so remember, this is going to change quite a bit, or somewhat anyway, is to fund $2.2 million worth of items, capital items, through capital exclusions. We haven't even talked about how this would go. Would this be a menu approach on the ballot? Would it be, probably it would be some kind of a menu approach where you list the items out and people vote yes or no on each one rather than having them lumped into one big item. Capital exclusions, those would most likely be separated out as well. The items from the operating budget are listed there, and that's the total minimum funding requirement. And then free cash is the bulk of the remainder of our current recommendations, our current items that we would be proposing to fund in 19. A little bit for multi-use paths coming from prior article reappropriations. The Fairgrounds Road area roadway, this is the roadway that would be needed for the community housing development for 6 Fairgrounds. And this is a number, well, 400,000 is not the total number of the road. It's more like
Right.
closer to 2 million.
It's
Yes.
right, and it's actually in free cash and in here. So
Sorry, okay,
if
right.
if a funding source is split, it's located in the two locations where it would be coming from. So there's 800,000 for the road in free cash, and then there's the 400,000 from here.
And we're learning that that might not even be the total number for the road, so we might have to do some readjusting there.
Okay, and just while it's topical, can I interrupt?
Yep.
Is the breakdown, the 400, 800, that's just an accounting aspect, or is there actually a design construction element to that, or?
That's just, the 400, 800 is just a funding element aspect.
Okay.
That would get to the 1.2 million that was on the sheets.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay.
And then the parks is just a small thing that would go towards a,
And just on the parks, there is the bond premium proceeds was only 22,416. That request was 50,000, so there is a small piece that would come out of free cash, and that's listed first under uses of free cash for the 27,584 to get to the total that was in the ask of the 50,000.
so you're just getting this now. You're probably going to want to look at it, think about it, come up with some questions about it. The other sheet is really just by department. It was just a different way to sort it.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, sir. Chris?
I didn't know if there was anything CPC related.
Okay. Good question. We have had preliminary internal discussions about possible CPC for this weight drive project and the possibility of CPC funding debt service to borrow some or all of that amount. But we're only preliminarily discussing it right now, right, Ryan?
Yeah, that's correct.
But we're just trying to think of other ways to fund that
Yep.
particular project. So that's a discussion we haven't really finished yet,
All right.
but it's kind of started, just to see if it's viable.
Just while we're on the, so I see we've got bonds, or grants rather, with the FAA funding. How is that addressed in here as that these numbers are net of that, or I believe that we go forward with the full amount and then that gets
Right.
applied later?
This is only general fund.
General.
Right. So this grant here is the grant that we've been told that we have for the
Harbor.
for the harbor building. So the way once we do a little bit additional research on how that would be paid to us, if it comes as lump sum, then we would only ask to borrow the remainder, the difference. If it's a drawdown type of a grant, then we would ask for the authorization to borrow the full 3.4 million for cash flow purposes, and then we would only permanently borrow the net amount, and then that would be the amount that actually was added as a debt exclusion would be that net amount.
Okay, great.
So there's still a little bit of work on how that grant is administered that we're working on.
Thank you. And then just to follow up, Libby, so with respect to the enterprise, is that something you'll give us a preliminary on how those are going to be handled, or?
Right now, I think the bulk, if not all of those, are going to be handled through retained earnings or expected grants or
borrowings.
anticipated revenue or borrowing.
Right.
To be repaid back through the enterprise fund. Solid waste is the only one that I
We
don't
need
know if
to
we've-
probably continue discussions internally.
Yeah, we
about
just
what
haven't
we're gonna
finished
do.
that one yet.
Okay, so what I would ask is that at the next iteration, we would have the enterprise
Yes.
funds included, and at that point, it sounds like it'll be more solid in any event, so it's useful information, more useful for us than it is now.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things is the enterprise funds are going through their budget deliberations now, so they're kind of determining what they want to set aside for retained earnings to use towards capital. So,
Right, and.
which is what I'm in discussions with them about as we speak right now.
Okay, great. And then also, I seem to recall that FAA was to be here to meet with the airport to discuss what portion of projects they would be covering, and I think
That's
is
today.
due,
That's
is it
today.
today?
I think today.
Okay, so those items will be resolved too, which would be helpful for us in terms of buttoning things up. Okay. Any other comments from town admin or finance on those? Thank you.
Good.
Thank you.
So guys, yeah, just please review, and as you would in any case, and then I'll follow up on this topic as we close out the meeting and we discuss data next meeting. Christie?
Just a question for Libby. Rob, we were talking about specifically Jetties Beach and, expanded services on, by the tenant. How does that relate to contract and lease negotiation? Going from a hot dog and burger stand to being a full-fledged restaurant.
Well,
Does that come into play at all?
I'm not really sure what exactly the question is. The current lease with Jetties, for example, was through a procurement process. It was through an RFP. So they made a proposal for their service,
Gotcha.
and they were the most responsive and most qualified proposer that met all the criteria. And so,
Kristen, may I ask, were you asking if there's some type of an offset in the contract for improvements that happen as a result? or-
Yeah. So I just didn't know what I know they're, what's it, a 5-year lease?
it's a 5-year lease,
Yep.
yeah.
I just didn't know if, because they're using the facility much more than it's been used in the past, that if that relates into an increased, or more of an expectation of a bid.
I don't know if you can say they're using the facility more than it's been used in the past. They have, I mean, there are limitations on the number of events that they can have in the lease itself, so that the beach remains open to the public for the most part, except for the couple of one-offs like the pops and the fireworks. But I don't know that they are supposed to, I mean, I don't have the lease in front of me, but there's an arrangement, a monetary arrangement when they're shutting the facility down for an event that
Yes.
they pay for.
Yep. Found that out this year. I didn't even know that. It's interesting how that's set up. They had to have it because they can't be open for profit when the place is full of people that are just showing up for something. It's like different.
But also when they're shutting
Complicated.
down for something and the people can't use the beach, they have to pay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think Christie's questions are sort of similar to what I'm asking. I think the ultimate question at the end of all of this stuff, whether it be children's, whether it be, I think Surfside is a little bit lesser of an issue, to be totally truthful. I mean, I don't see any problem at Surfside at all. Is the fact that the town, it's sort of like the Island Home, really. Okay, we got a building that we're not going to make any money if we build it, because it's going to provide something that we need that doesn't have the ability to be a marina or something that is just can generate a ton of money. You know what I'm saying? So it's an investment question. Similar to the 37 Washington Street stuff. I mean, we've had these conversations at different times about different places, and they sort of are related. This is where the legacy historic thing that I sort of kind of came up with. I don't know if it was just me.
But
It's complicated because we want it to be a family atmosphere. In today's world, it's a little different than it was back in the day. But at the same time, we have to be able to provide something that somebody can use at the same time.
I agree.
You know what I mean?
you're-
It's complicated. I see where all these problems are coming from. I just think that we need to.
If you're asking, should they be paying for some of the repairs or maintenance, I don't know, is it typical that leasees pay for the landlord's facility?
Okay, I got to jump in here
And
because there's a
IR
couple
does.
things going on. We're kind of spinning out of control.
Yeah, sorry.
Number one, I think the question, as I understood it, was what you just said is, are they responsible? And my understanding would be that if something they were doing was above and beyond what they're entitled to do, then they would be responsible. However, I'm sure there's a process in place where if they're expanding the service, they need to be back in front of the Board of Selectmen, and some adjustment would have to happen, even if it was even allowed, because this was under an RFP process.
Right.
So, but that also, so that's relevant to the discussion we were having. I think Nat and Chris, you're bringing up good points, but those are part of a bigger picture and part of the process that we'll undertake during our evaluation.
Sure.
And we need to get back to parks.
Yep.
So I want to add to that while I'm up here. To Christie's point, if they're as they're interested in attracting folks to their location and sort of making it look better than it is currently. They do occasionally embellish the outside with an awning or trellis work or something like that. That's on them. So when I
Yeah, I got you.
if they're putting lipstick on the pig, right, they're responsible for the lipstick.
Yeah. Makes sense. Makes sense.
So we've got Parks, then Solid Waste, and the DPW administration. And it's 10 now, so
Yep.
please keep that in mind.
So we can go through fairly quickly on this.
Yeah.
Parks planning is essentially just that. It's master planning. It's stepping back, taking a look at all the facilities that we currently are responsible for, and taking a real hard look at what are we currently doing there, and what is the future going to look like. And then it's, in subsequent years, drilling down into each of those facilities and really doing a full-on master plan with a actionable design plan that will then be subsequently funded for improvements. So that is, first and foremost, focusing on the facility out at Tom Nevers. It's been a recent groundswell of interested people, both residents in and around the Tom Nevers location, as well as other folks around town that are interested in just parks and recreation to boot. So we've made some serious changes to the whole setup of how we deliver operation and maintenance to parks, how we operate programs at our parks through the community school now. So there's a lot that has changed, much like we've talked about with other things. The last 20, 30 years has seen a lot of change, and yet our facilities, for the most part, have remained the same or continued to degrade because of lack of investment. So we continue to operate and invest in the maintenance end of things. We have built brand-new parks. We've built brand-new fields, but there hasn't been a master plan done for the entire island, for its parks and facilities. So that's sort of where this would lead off. And again, it would start to look at true investment in the parks that haven't been reconstructed and haven't been planned spaces, for decades.
Yeah, well, if we got quick questions, let's hit them now, and
Just a
then
quick
we'll
one.
do each one. And we'll just do each group and then move on. Go ahead, Kristen.
Rob, what in your opinion, what's the park that's at the very bottom that needs the most work?
I think the Tom Nevers site really is
Yeah,
the
okay.
low-hanging fruit. There's and the real advantage there, Christy, is that you have a extremely interested and motivated group that's already assembled that has a tremendous inertia. So I think that is just incredible. Because to get to that point, not to say that the decision has already been made as to what the plan is, but you already have people that are really motivated to make change, and that is hard to get to. So I think building on that and allowing that to run its course is going to happen a lot faster than we would expect under normal circumstances.
Yeah, Parnas, just while we're on that topic, Rob, how does the overall concept of the planning relate to existing, let's say, parks and rec, where there are outdoor recreational areas like playing fields, and they're not part of the school department? Is this going to be joining that planning together so that not only are we looking at improvements, park areas or areas of town land that could be parks or are parks that exist that need improvement, but these other things that are kind of under, I would say, traditionally park and recs? I'm not suggesting a sea change in terms of how departments are managed, but I want to know how the planning that you foresee relates to those other
Sure.
facilities.
This would focus square. I thought you were going to extend it to like island-wide recreational facilities, just private, public, regardless.
No, just
So what I'm going to say is that
Town public.
all the facilities that we currently maintain under Public Works.
Yeah.
So I think it's 7 or 9 collective.
So they're all included.
That's right.
Okay, thank you, that's helpful. Any other questions on parks? Okay, so we'll move directly to the solid waste
Yeah, sure.
improvement projects.
So solid waste, obviously the Solid Waste Enterprise Fund, working with Waste Options to provide us with their ask with we have some items that actually were asked for by Waste Options for fiscal 18, including a baler for cardboard, thank you. And that either was not asked for or just fell off of the fiscal 18 capital. I think the important part here is we own the MRF, the Materials Recovery Facility, where other recycling occurs. And because of that, and with our contract, we are contractually obligated to provide capital reinvestments and maintain those sort of
Like jetties.
important pieces. So the replacement of the cardboard balers is really key. We're hoping that the limited amount of repairs that have occurred to that are going to keep that in service through the end of this year. But frankly, it's questionable. And beyond that, we have some repairs to the sorting station and online landfill mining continuing to the tune that we have in the past at $700,000, and that's it. We're looking out some bigger ticket items down the road, include landfill closure, starting to look at closure of 1A, 1B, and 1C.
Okay, yeah, that's good to put on the radar, thank you. Christie, did you?
Yeah, Rob, the baler, replacing the baler, is all other components of processing cardboard intact? Or, for example, taking it off island, whatever else we need to do with it, or whatever other components there might be associated with the full processing of cardboard intact?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
separate from this. And essentially, it's a off-island vendor, Cape Cod Express. Takes virtually all of our recyclable materials off-island.
Great, okay.
So the process now is the cardboard's collected, separated, it's baled, and then the bales go onto a Cape Cod Express box truck or trailer until the trailer's stacked full, and then it's taken off.
Is that by bid?
That is not by bid. That's a negotiated contract between Waste Options and Cape Cod Express.
Just because context, you know.
They're
Oh, yeah.
already leaving empty trucks 10 a day.
Yeah,
Well,
that's
Simple.
good. It's good.
But
Over the
the
bridge.
point is that, not that it's not in our best interest, and actually, we're required to, people out here all the time in this and other meetings, that we are obligated to follow public procurement law. So, interestingly, there's a litany of exemptions from public procurement law. One of them is with regard to solid waste. So there is an exemption from solid waste from needing to follow public procurement law. And then beyond that, our contract with Waste Options is to provide specific services, but we're not dictating to them
Who they use.
or how they do it. So the point is that that's under their own, it's in their own best interest to find certainly the best competitive prices to stay competitive as a business.
Okay, great. Richard?
Just a quick question. When does the Waste Options contract come up for renewal?
I believe that is 2025.
Good luck.
It's coming.
But
Another
to
discussion.
follow up on that, I know the town manager has already initiated discussions with myself and others, but to start to pull together an actual committee, a solid waste committee to discuss the future. of solid waste well before the contract comes.
That would be the smartest thing you've ever done since you got here, even though it's only been a short time.
Conversation's
Very
already
good.
started.
Yeah.
So we have
Our
started.
level 2.
And that's applauded.
And erosion. Thank you.
And erosion, thank you. Okay, any
And
other questions?
as far as administration goes, basically talking about data integration and essentially getting a project together that is going to continue to further our foray into data gathering, GIS data gathering that's going to support our staff and be able to have access to this information in the field. So we're programming a sort of a fixed amount, and we're going to jump off and see how far that takes us and adjust the price as necessary.
Okay, so on that one, I just, a question or two. You're looking at something that's going to be open source or out of the box, or, I guess the concern is where the town seems to be going, hopefully, is bigger data to be making informed decisions and operate more efficiently. And is this going to, is this development for 150,000 going to be complementary to that in the sense that it will be able to interface with other database sets?
So
or is it a
the
closed system out of the box?
well, the open source stuff that's coming of age and is now being used for trending and to try to inform some of the bigger scope decisions, I would say is serving a similar but a bit of a different purpose. What we're talking about is we're currently working with a specific vendor. We have, right now, there's at least a couple different platforms being used between water, sewer, and DPW. So what we're hoping to do is come together, at least the three utilities, and take a look at what makes the most sense and build off of that, so that ultimately we have shared data dictionary requirements that we're all working as one, so that the data we're producing is interchangeable between departments. Ultimately, the stuff that comes out of that, whether it's reports, plans, etc., that can inform a larger decision, and that could be released, as other public documents are able to be. But we're not necessarily we're using stuff that's not only being customized for our use, but developing programs that we can use in-house and support that with in-house equipment.
Mm-hmm. So you're going to have platform integration between the three services. It'll play well with the others, and then there will be interoperability with the bigger data sets, perhaps, but more so through reports, and then just like a second level entry. Okay, I get it.
Yep.
Questions on the data integration? Okay, good. Rob, we appreciate you coming
Yes.
in.
I appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, so guys, we're going to need 5 minutes just to get our business wrapped up. There's a couple quick things, and we'll be on our way. So, I guess discussion. Is there any discussion on rankings with these particular requests in mind at this point?
Well, with the regular ranking sheet,
Just as applies, I'm going to comment on what we're going to do next with them, but just as it applies to any of these requests, does anyone have comments or concerns about a ranking for a particular request? Richard?
I kind of neglected to note that there is a note at the bottom of those first 7 requests that says that the town admin recommends $1 million. So I guess the town has already lumped those together.
well, it's $1 million, but the other, it's only 250,000 more for that same thing. So I mean, I think that's just a footnote, right?
So we're going to rank those all as one item. I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, is that going to be lumped as one for
Yeah.
ranking purposes?
Wait, specifically which
Facilities
request?
management. Maintenance,
5
sorry.
through 10, or 005 through 010.
No, I think at this point, in discussion, we may determine that we're going to evaluate, in our evaluations for our recommendation, I think we will ultimately lump them together.
We should.
But
It's
in
not-
terms of ranking them, just rank them as individuals.
So one sheet per line item as individual, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, look, anything that has a planet number gets a rank. So these are individual, and that's so that it can be tracked. This is more for future use than it is for us today. But anything that has a planet number gets a ranking sheet. Because it's going to be individually trackable. When these are, if these are, go through the process, the funds are authorized and appropriated, these will be tracked individually. They won't be tracked as a group. The town manager's recommendation on the funding is more of a quantifying the dollar numbers as a group, but in terms of analytics with the finance department, these are actually tracked individually. So we'll rank them individually. Julia?
And please don't forget DPW garage, which doesn't have a plan number.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you,
Yeah,
do you have, I mentioned to Brian earlier, and he was going to get us one.
I'll get you.
Okay, no
I just
worries.
don't have it
Christy,
right
did you?
I was just going to say, because a lot of these projects and facilities have requests going out years, I do think that even though they're lumped together, it's important to question them individually if you see the need, or if you see fit. If there's a comment, or if there's an item on there that is, not just to say, oh, it's lumped in, so you can't say anything about it, but that there's,
I think it's somewhat of
you still have the
a, kind of a
opportunity to-
placeholder.
yeah.
A little bit, but
Thank,
yeah.
thank you,
And
Christy.
then a comment?
Yeah, please.
I've deemed the puddle down at Jetty's Beach heritage and legacy, so I'm not going to prove it. I'm good.
And the scallop shells.
So deemed. Okay, great. So, any other ranking type questions on those in particular? No? Okay. So, I just want to give you guys a reminder, general reminder to get these to Julia. The holidays are coming up. There's a lot of them, I understand. There's 25 requests, but she needs some time to put them in and turn them around for the next meeting, which is a segue into the next meeting. We're going to have, on our agenda for the next meeting will be to review the format of the ranking sheet. We're not going to be, we may at a later point in the meeting review, but initially we're going to be reviewing what the report looks like, how we want to, so we can have a discussion of how we want to use it.
Thought we were meeting tomorrow.
I'm going to get to that when we
Okay.
get the date of next
Okay.
meeting.
Sorry.
So I just want to let you kind of plant that seed that when the next time we meet to talk about rankings, at least initially, we're going to be talking about the format. There's a lot of data and how it's being presented, and I'm working with Julia. She's been incredibly helpful with helping to put it together from the Excel data. And we'll really just be looking at, okay, well, how do we want this information presented to us, and what will we do with it? Because part of what we will do with it is your feedback and input to me on what a final recommendation is going to look like. So it's a really important discussion. It may just seem kind of programmatic, but it's important for us to have, and I just want to let you know that that's coming up. After that, we'll be doing the actual going through and wading through the rankings and discussing them, project by request by request to the extent anyone wants to. And if we need to make changes to the rankings, the way it's been set up in the Excel workbook is we can just, you can make a note, get it to Julia, and we'll refine our rankings and finalize them before we get to a final evaluation.
So even more important to have all our
Yeah.
rankings in,
Yes, please.
so that we're dealing with a complete.
Data set, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of committee discussion on ranking. We talked the review of the funding sources briefly. Date of next meeting. Tomorrow's meeting has been canceled, rescheduled to the 29th. It will be transportation. It will be the format of the ranking sheet. Town administration won't be here only until 9 o'clock, so it's as if they weren't going to be able to be here. Peter is off island, and I'm going to be tied up until probably 9. So it just seemed like
It's fine.
more.
I
more
love
sense. Okay.
I like canceling.
So I can't.
It just compresses because we know we have more to do, though.
Oh,
So I'd suggest
so that's our next meeting overall. We're not
29.
having a meeting next Wednesday.
not having a meeting next. Well, Thanksgiving.
I know, but
Yeah.
I just figure people do go away. I was just curious what
Yep.
we were doing. All
Sure.
right.
No, that makes sense.
All right.
So
Have we already rescheduled what we had planned for that day?
transportation will be the 29th.
The 29th, and then we had Old South Road corridor on that day. Did that already give you schedules?
That's part of transportation.
Okay.
That'll
yeah,
be part of
okay.
transportation.
And
then
Mike's going to be here, right? I would
Mike will be
assume.
here. I contacted Mike, and I believe Julia did.
Okay.
Yes, Chris?
Julia, what's the soonest you could get a sheet for us to fill out, the one that edit and reply that I prefer? What's the soonest you get that to us for us to get it back to you?
With all the projects?
Yeah.
listed, basically, yeah, I can get that to you probably this summer.
Okay.
Or does it, before we do that, can we just slam on the brake for just a second, or just tap the brake? I would prefer, if you're going to go through getting it together and sending it out to us, that we get the projects, the requests that we received today in, because it's 25 of
That's
them.
what I'm referring to. So I could fill in my put in my rankings.
Oh, okay. You're
Just
talking about two different things then. You're,
Yeah, I mean, what I can do, because I have to set it up anyway, so what I can do is I set up the tabs, and
Yeah.
each individual has their own column, and they can go in and for each project.
Right.
Input it.
Can
And
you
then
s-
send it back. Some people don't have scanning ability or whatnot, or whatever
Okay.
the case may be.
So you're talking about sending worksheet, a workbook with tabs that people can click on with their own names on for each request?
Just
and-
blank.
And it'll be, okay. Is that gonna work for you?
I have to do it anyways for the final product, so
Yeah,
No.
you've been doing it,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. All I was asking is when we expect to receive it, so I know when to
It's
put
been more
it.
ad hoc.
Yeah.
It's a little bit.
That's fine.
Okay, so I guess the takeaway from that is, if you fill out your forms and send them in, do it that way. If you work with Julia and she sends you a spreadsheet to fill them out,
I'm done. I'm
then
just gonna hit
you'll
this.
continue with that.
I feel bad, though.
As opposed to making anything
A little funny
confusing.
for me. I'll figure it out.
So I wanted to mention also, our next meeting will have, our Island Home will be on the agenda. So they'll be bringing in some requests for, I think it's more a reauthorization or supplemental, sorry, thank you. And kind of rejiggering those. Some of the projects came in and over. They did the projects that they could under the authorization, and those that couldn't be done under their authorization require supplemental, which we will be reviewing. And along the lines, there is a broader discussion this evening at the Selectmen's meeting here. They meet at 6 o'clock.
Yes.
I don't know when it is on the agenda, but it's a discussion of our Island Home in a broader sense. Is that,
Broader, but I'm sure some specifics are going to come out.
yeah, okay.
Hopefully we'll come out with
It's never
some
flooded, just so you know.
some direction
Where it
of
is.
where we're moving towards outside of this
Process.
this appropriation that we'll be looking at next Wednesday.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Okay, great, that's helpful.
but that'll be in there.
So if you have an interest, Richard, I understand you're going, I'll be there, but if anyone has an interest. And then, I think that's it. If there's any comments, no comments, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank